My name is Michael Turner. I'm 57 years old, and this is the story of how I learned that loving your child isn't always enough to protect the things you hold dear. It's strange how one moment, one missing item, one sentence spoken with careless confidence can crack open the truth you've been afraid to see. And for me, that moment began with something as small and simple as a pocket watch. If you enjoy real stories like mine, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. I grew up in a family where objects meant something, not because of their monetary value, but because of the memories attached to them. The pocket watch was like that. It belonged to my grandfather first. He carried it every day while working long hours in a Detroit auto plant. When my father turned 21, my grandfather gave him the watch and told him it was a reminder to appreciate time because it would never slow down for anyone. My dad repeated that line to me the day he placed the same watch in my hand on my 21st birthday. I didn't feel ready, and maybe he knew that, but he smiled like he trusted me with it. Years later, when I married my wife Laura, I carried the watch in the inside pocket of my suit. She held my hand before the ceremony and whispered, "I'm glad your dad's with you today." She meant through the watch. Laura always understood things in a deeper way than most people. She was the one who surprised me with the restoration for our 20th anniversary. I still remember the way she watched me open the little case, her eyes warm with that quiet satisfaction she always had when she managed to do something kind without calling attention to it. After she passed last year, the watch became more than an heirloom. It became a lifeline. I kept it in a wooden box on my dresser, the same box Laura bought at a craft fair back when Evan was in middle school. Every morning I would open the lid, touch the smooth gold, listen to the soft ticking. It made me feel like the world hadn't completely changed, even though my life felt like a house missing one of its walls. Evan came back home about 6 months after Laura died. I didn't question it when he showed up with his suitcases, looking tired and annoyed at the world. He said college wasn't what he expected. He said he needed time to figure out what he really wanted. And I wanted to believe him. I wanted to be the kind of father who opens the door without hesitation. Maybe because Laura always believed in second chances. Maybe because the house felt too quiet without anyone else in it. He told me he'd get a part-time job. He told me he'd help around the house. He told me he'd be gone in a couple of months. But promises are easy when you're young and everything feels temporary. At first, I didn't complain. Evan slept late. He spent hours on his phone. He talked about cryptocurrency like he'd discovered some secret portal to instant success. I'd hear him pacing in the hallway at night, muttering phrases he picked up from podcasts, things like long-term upside, market correction, early investor advantage, words that sounded important but didn't change the fact that he wasn't actually doing anything. I tried talking to him a few times. I'd sit at the kitchen table with him, drinking my morning coffee while he scrolled through apps. "How's the job search going?" He'd shrug, not looking up. "I'm working on it." "That's not an answer, Evan." He'd sigh loudly as if I were interrupting something meaningful. "Dad, it's different now. People work online. I don't need some 9-to-5 office thing." "You need something," I'd say. But he'd already be walking away. I wanted to believe he just needed time. I told myself he was grieving too, that losing his mother had shaken him in ways he didn't know how to talk about. But denial is a soft, comfortable place to rest when reality feels too painful. And I rested there longer than I should have. Little things started going missing a couple of months after he moved back. At first, I thought it was just me. A $20 bill gone from my wallet, my flashlight missing from the drawer, a Bluetooth speaker I used in the garage during weekend projects. Each time, Evan insisted he didn't know anything. "Dad, seriously, you're always losing stuff. It's fine." "I'm not losing things." But he'd laugh it off, and I'd let it slide, because the alternative, that my son was lying and taking from me hurt more than a missing bill or some tool. One Saturday, I noticed my winter jacket was gone from the hallway closet. I checked my car, the basement, even the laundry room. Nothing. When I asked Evan, he frowned like I had insulted him. "Why would I take your jacket?" "I don't know, Evan. That's why I'm asking." "Well, I didn't." And that was the end of the conversation. He walked away, and I felt something small and heavy settle in my chest. The watch disappeared on a Wednesday morning in late October. I had woken up early, earlier than usual, because for once the house felt peaceful. Evan wasn't wandering the hallway watching videos on his phone. The air smelled like the first real hint of autumn, that crisp coldness that made me miss Laura more than usual. I made coffee, went upstairs, and started my morning routine. I opened the wooden box on my dresser, expecting to see the familiar glint of gold peeking through the velvet lining. The box was empty. For a moment, I simply stared. It didn't make sense. Things don't just vanish from closed boxes. I picked up the box, turned it over, even reached inside as if the watch might be hiding, as if I might feel its familiar cool weight. But the velvet pouch at the bottom lay flat against the wood. I checked the dresser drawers, the nightstand, under the bed, in my coat pockets, every possible place. Nothing. My heart pounded in a way I hadn't felt in years. Not fear exactly, not anger. Something deeper. Something like the slow cracking of trust. I walked downstairs and found Evan in the living room, headphones on, sprawled across the sofa. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Evan, have you seen my pocket watch?" He glanced at me, then at his phone. "No. Why?" "It's missing." He shrugged. "Maybe you moved it." "I didn't move it." "Well, I didn't touch it." Something in his tone, flat, uninterested, told me more than his words did. "Evan," I said softly, "look at me." He turned slowly, and I saw it right away. A flicker of guilt, a tightening around his mouth, the tiny signs you learn to read when you watch someone grow up. "Tell me the truth," I said. He looked away for a moment. "Dad, seriously, you're overreacting." "Evan, where is the watch?" He took a breath, exhaled sharply, and muttered, "Fine, if you're going to make this a thing, I sold it." The world didn't tilt. It didn't explode. It just folded inward. Quiet, crushing disappointment filled my chest like cold smoke. "You... what?" I whispered.
The pawn shop was smaller than I expected, wedged between a closed diner and a storefront with faded for lease signs taped to the windows. The parking lot was mostly empty. A battered neon sign flickered above the door, buzzing faintly in the cold air. I sat in the car for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to steady myself. It felt surreal to think my son had stood in this same place, holding the watch that had belonged to the three men who shaped my life. I walked inside. A little bell chimed overhead. The shop smelled like dust, metal, and something faintly chemical. Rows of guitars lined one wall. Tools hung behind the counter. Glass cases held everything from jewelry to old collectible coins. A man in his early 50s, with a trimmed beard and glasses perched low on his nose, looked up when I approached. "Morning," he said. "Let me know if you need help with anything." "I do," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "My son came here a few weeks ago. He pawned a gold pocket watch. It belonged to my father. I need to buy it back." The man nodded slightly and motioned for me to follow him to the counter. "Tell me the name." "Evan Turner," I said. He typed into a computer, adjusted the glasses on his nose, and scrolled through records. Then he nodded. "Yep, pocket watch, gold case. Came in on the 11th. My chest tightened. "Is it still here?" "Let me check the shelf." He disappeared into a back room. The seconds felt heavy, like they were pressing down on my shoulders. I stared at the scuffed tile floor and tried to steady my breathing. He returned holding a black velvet pouch. "I believe this is what you're looking for." He set it on the counter gently, as if he understood it meant more than its market value. My hands shook as I opened the pouch. There it was, the familiar gold gleam, the thin chain, the tiny latch Laura had insisted they repair so cleanly. I touched it with my fingertips, and the cold metal felt like a jolt of electricity straight to my heart. "How much do I owe?" I asked quietly. He glanced at his screen again. "We gave your son $200 for it, but the appraisal came back higher. If you want to buy it out, it'll be $650. $650. More than I expected, more than I liked, but I would have paid 10 times that. "I'll need a day," I said, "but please don't sell it." He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "I can't hold it officially," he said, "but I'll keep it in the back. Just come early." "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. That night, the house felt different. Not quiet in the peaceful way I used to appreciate, but quiet in a strained, suffocating way. Evan stayed in his room. I could hear faint clicking sounds, probably him on his computer, maybe still trading imaginary fortunes while leaving real wreckage behind. I sat at the kitchen table long after midnight, staring at the grain of the wood. I thought about my father, about Laura, about the years we spent raising Evan, teaching him kindness, responsibility, empathy. I wondered how much of those lessons he had ever truly taken to heart, or whether grief had twisted him into someone I barely recognized. The next morning, I went straight to the bank as soon as it opened, withdrew the money, and headed back to the pawn shop. I parked out front, clutching the envelope tightly in my hand. Before I could get out, my phone rang. An unfamiliar number flashed on the screen. "Hello?" I answered. "Mr. Turner, this is Rick Dawson. You were here yesterday asking about a pocket watch." "Yes," I said, my pulse quickening. "I'm outside now." "I thought you should know, your son came by this morning." The air seemed to thicken around me. "What? Why?" "He wanted the watch back. Said he had the right to reclaim it." My heart sunk. "He didn't." "I'm afraid he did," he said. He asked if anyone purchased it yet. When I told him you were planning to come back, he didn't take it well. A wave of nausea rolled through me. What did he do? He didn't hurt anyone, he said quickly. Just caused a bit of a scene. Tried to argue that the watch was technically his. My employees had to ask him to leave. I rubbed my forehead. I'm so sorry. You don't owe me an apology, he said firmly. I just wanted you to know it, and to get here before he tries something else. I'm coming in now, I said. I hung up the phone, pocketed my phone, and took a slow breath before stepping out of the car. Inside, Rick greeted me with a sympathetic look. Rough morning? You could say so. He nodded and disappeared into the back room. A moment later, he placed the velvet pouch on the counter again. The sight of it, so small and unassuming, yet holding decades of family history, made my throat tighten. You sure you want to buy it back? He asked softly. Yes, I said, without hesitation. I handed him the envelope. He counted the bills, put them in the register, and printed a receipt. It's yours again, he said with a small smile. Thank you, I whispered. I held the pouch tightly as I walked out of the shop, as if the thing inside might vanish again if I loosened my grip. When I got home, Evan was pacing the living room. He stopped when I came through the door, eyes darting to the pouch in my hand. You bought it back? He asked incredulously. Yes, I said. Are you kidding me? He snapped. Dad, do you have any idea what I could have turned that money into? That investment was a sure thing. You keep saying that, I replied quietly, but a sure thing doesn't require stealing from your own father. Here we go again, he rolled his eyes. You're being dramatic. I took a slow breath. Evan, you didn't just take something from me. You took something from your grandfather and from your mother. She had this restored for me. It meant the world to her. Well, she's not here anymore. The words hit me like a slap. I felt something inside me go very still. He must have seen it on my face because his expression flickered for just a moment with regret, but only for a moment. I needed the money, he muttered, as if that excused everything. You needed integrity. You needed honesty. You needed to think about someone other than yourself. You don't get how things work now, Dad. I'm trying to get ahead. I'm trying to build something. By tearing down everything I trusted in you? He didn't answer. He just crossed his arms and stared stubbornly at the floor. I can't live like this, I said quietly. I can't ignore what you've done, and I can't pretend it doesn't matter. So what? You're kicking me out? I'm asking you to take responsibility, to stand on your own 2 feet, and yes, you need to find another place to stay. Unbelievable! He stormed past me, grabbed his backpack from the hallway, and slammed the front door behind me. I stood there for a long time, listening to the silence settle back into the house. I didn't know where he went. I didn't know if he had a plan. And as much as it hurt, I realized this might be the only thing that could push him toward the maturity he needed.
That night, I sat in the living room holding the watch. I turned it over in my hand, tracing the tiny scratches along the back, the ones that had been there since long before I was born. The ticking was steady, calm, almost comforting. It felt strange to think that Evan had held the same object just weeks earlier and seen only dollar signs. I wondered if I had failed him somehow, if losing Laura had left a void in him I couldn't fill, no matter how much I tried. I thought about calling him, but I didn't. Every instinct in me wanted to reach out, to make sure he was safe, to tell him I didn't hate him. But another part of me, the part that sounded like Laura, told me he needed to face the consequences of what he'd done. If I rescued him every time he stumbled, he'd never learn to walk on his own. The house felt too quiet again. I missed having someone else moving around in the rooms, even if that person had been a source of stress. Grief is strange like that. You get used to sadness, to the hollowness. You get so used to it that even pain becomes a kind of company. Around 10 that night, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, thinking it might be another spam call, but something pushed me to answer. "Hello?" I said. "Dad?"
A few months passed. The routines of our new lives settled in more quietly than I expected. Evan's alarm would go off at 7 in the morning. I'd hear him moving around, getting ready for work at the hardware store. Some mornings we'd cross paths in the kitchen, him pouring coffee, me finishing mine. We didn't always say much, but there was something steady in the simple rhythm of sharing the space without tension. He'd come home with little stories. A customer who couldn't decide between two types of paint, an elderly man who came in just to talk about tools he no longer had the strength to use, a kid who knocked over a display and cried until Evan helped him fix it. Nothing earth-shattering, just small, real pieces of a day that he had actually earned. One evening, he dropped his work boots by the door and sank onto the couch with a tired sigh. "Long day?" I asked from my chair. "Yeah," he said. "We had this guy come in who insisted he didn't need help and got mad because he couldn't find what he wanted." I chuckled. "Sounds familiar. Try teaching teenagers who swear they know everything already." He gave me a little smile. "Yeah, I guess I'm getting a taste of that." There were still moments when I'd catch him looking at my dresser upstairs, where the wooden box sat. Sometimes his hand would hover near it, like he wanted to open it but didn't feel like he had the right. After a while, I realized he wasn't thinking about the watch as money anymore. He was thinking about it as something he'd almost erased. One Sunday afternoon, I found him standing in my doorway, glancing at the box. "Go ahead," I said. "You can open it." He hesitated. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." He stepped inside slowly, like he was entering a room in a museum. He lifted the lid of the box and stared at the watch. For a long moment, he didn't touch it. Then he reached out, picked it up carefully, and turned it over in his hand. "It's heavier than I remember," he said quietly. "It always was. You just didn't feel it before." He nodded, still looking at it. "I'm sorry," he said again. It wasn't the first time he'd said those words, but something about the way he stood there, still, humbled, thoughtful, made them feel deeper. "I know," I said, "and I see how hard you're trying." He put the watch back gently and stepped away from the dresser. "I'm going to keep paying you back," he said. "Not just with money, with effort, I guess." "I'd like that," I said. Life didn't turn into a perfect movie after that. There were still disagreements. There were evenings when he came home grumpy, when he snapped at me and later apologized. There were days when I missed Laura so fiercely I had to go for a walk just to breathe. Grief didn't leave just because our relationship was improving. But there was a new honesty between us. Then, one afternoon, my phone rang. I was in the backyard, trimming some overgrown branches, when I felt it buzz in my pocket. I almost let it go to voicemail, but I wiped my hands and answered. "Hello? Mr. Turner? This is Rick Dawson from the pawn shop." My heart skipped. For a split second, old panic flared up before I reminded myself the watch was safe in my dresser. "Yes," I said. "Hi, Rick. Everything okay?" "I think so," he said. There was a smile in his voice this time. "I just wanted to call you about your son." That sentence used to terrify me. This time, I braced myself, but tried to stay open. "What about him?" I asked. "He came by yesterday, but not to pawn anything. He came to talk." I walked over to the patio table and sat down slowly. "What did he say?" "He told me he wanted to apologize for how he acted that day, for the way he tried to argue about the watch. Said he was embarrassed about how he treated my staff and wanted to make it right." I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling a tightness in my chest that wasn't quite pain, more like relief. "He did?" I asked. He did. He even asked if there was any way he could make up for the trouble. I told him the best way was to keep doing better from here on out. He mentioned you a few times, said you gave him another chance when you didn't have to. I swallowed. I'm glad you talked to him. I figured you'd want to know. Most young guys who come in here, they don't look back. Your son did. That says something. I thanked him and hung up. Sitting there under the fading afternoon light, listening to the quiet sounds of the neighborhood. Kids playing somewhere down the block, a lawn mower several houses away, the distant hum of a car driving past. Evan came home a couple of hours later. He dropped his backpack on the chair by the door and headed toward the kitchen, but stopped when he saw me watching him. "What?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "I got a call from Rick." He froze. "Oh." We stood there for a moment, neither of us speaking. "You didn't have to do that. Apologize to him." "I did, actually. I was awful that day. I didn't like the version of myself I saw in his eyes. I don't want to be that guy." I nodded slowly. "I'm proud of you for going back." He shrugged, but his face softened. It felt like something I couldn't leave undone. We moved into the kitchen. I started dinner. He helped without being asked, chopping vegetables, rinsing dishes as we went. There was an ease between us that still surprised me sometimes. "Rick said you talked about me." He gave a small, embarrassed laugh. "Yeah, don't let it go to your head." "What did you tell him?" "That my dad was stubborn," he said, smirking, "but also that he didn't give up on me when I made it really easy to walk away." I felt something sting behind my eyes. I turned back to the pot on the stove so he wouldn't see me. "Dad?" he asked after a moment. "Yeah? Do you think Grandpa would hate me for what I did?" I turned the heat down and faced him. He looked younger in that moment than he had in years, not in an immature way, but in a vulnerable one. "No," I said firmly. "He'd be angry, disappointed, but he wouldn't hate you." "How do you know?" "Because he didn't hate me when I made my own mistakes, and I made plenty. He believed that who you are at your worst isn't all that you are, just a moment, a lesson." He exhaled slowly. "I'm trying really hard not to be my worst anymore." "I can see that," I said, "and I'm grateful." After dinner, we sat in the living room. Evan scrolled through his phone for a few minutes, then put it down and turned toward me. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Of course." "When you first found out about the watch and everything I had done, did you think I was hopeless?" The question caught me off guard. I thought about it carefully before replying. "No, I thought you were lost, and I was scared you didn't want to be found." He absorbed that quietly. "I was lost," he admitted. "I thought if I could just hit some big win, all the stuff I was feeling would go away. The guilt, the grief, the pressure. I thought if I made enough money fast enough, I'd finally feel safe, I guess." "Did it work?" I asked gently. He shook his head. "No. It made everything worse." "That's what shortcuts usually do," I said. He looked down at his hands. "I'm still scared sometimes that I'll mess up like that again." "You probably will," I said. "Not in the same way, I hope, but you'll make other mistakes. Everyone does. The difference is that now you know what it feels like to cross a line you can't uncross. That knowledge can guide you if you let it." He nodded slowly. "I don't ever want to see that look on your face again, the one you had when you told me I sold the watch." I remembered that moment vividly, the way my chest had felt hollow and heavy at the same time, the way the room had seemed to blur around the edges. I don't ever want to feel that way again. But I also don't want to spend the rest of our lives frozen in that moment. You're more than the worst thing you did. And you're more forgiving than I deserve. I smiled faintly. I'm still working on that part. He laughed quietly. It was a softer sound than the sarcastic scoffs he used to give me. Warmer, more honest. Later that night, after he'd gone to bed, I went upstairs. I opened the box on my dresser and took out the watch. I held it in my palm, feeling its familiar weight. I thought about my grandfather in that auto plant, about my father on his wedding day, about Laura handing me the restored watch with that little proud smile of hers. If they could see us now, I